Hello and good evening. Hello. You're very welcome. It's been a little while since I've had one of these live evenings up, so we are back with testing the technology slightly again. I unplugged everything, so maybe if you're watching, you could just drop me a comment and let me know that the sound is coming through all right and you're able to hear me and all that stuff is working. Just to put my mind at ease, because as usual you're kind of talking into this vacuous hole and you're not sure can anybody hear you or is it working properly. So say hello, drop me a comment to say the sound is working and you can hear me, and I'd appreciate that just to get us started here. So I'm just going to allow some people to come in. I can see that there's lots of people coming in, so I'm just going to allow that process to continue for a minute and just let a few people build up in here. Thanks, Colette can hear me. John Harrington, loud and clear. How are you guys doing this evening? Thank you for commenting and letting me know that things are working. Mary, all good. Ken, Tim, thank you. Colette even says I sound fabulous. Well, thank you, Colette. That's something I'm not told very often, so I will definitely take that compliment. Much appreciated. Kathy is there, Helen is there, it's all working. Brilliant. Sound man, how you, John? So I guess the first order of business with these evenings is, as always, it's an excuse for me to have a midweek bottle of wine. That's the only reason I do these things, is I'm able to have a midweek bottle of wine. So I have myself a little South African, I don't know if you can see that, little South African Pinot there. And I actually found this in a box down in the garage, and it's been sitting there too long. It's 2018. I think it's a little bit flat. I think I should have drank it a couple of years ago. But anyway, cheers. If you're having a little tipple yourself, cheers. I also realised that I broke a few of the wine glasses a few weeks ago, and I didn't replace them. So I've got like the little goblet thing going on now. I've broken all the glasses with stems. I'd like to just blame my wife for that, but it was me. It was definitely me. I broke them. So there you go. We've got the business out of the way. So I guess this evening was the idea with doing tonight in the photography context was to discuss a little bit about the different projects that I've done over the years, and I've got kind of folders of images and things like that to bring out to discuss with you guys and to look at the images and critique things a little bit, but I don't kind of want to talk about it in the context of the individual images too much if I can, like, as I don't want to kind of say, oh, I shot this with this f-stop or use that filter or things like that, because we do enough of that. And really what I'm hoping to try and do is to discuss the bodies of work, how they've kind of evolved and what I've learned, I guess, from trying to put a collection of work together as opposed to creating individual images. And that's kind of where I wanted to go this evening. I can see Paul Byrne says he's having Pinot too. Fair play, Paul. I'll have to cheers you again, gives me an excuse as well. So yeah, that's kind of the context. So I mean, let's start off and just say, does anybody have any questions about creating an image collection, about creating a body of work? Is anybody trying to do it? Is it something that you struggle with? Or is there something that you're hoping I can answer tonight, or something that you'll learn? So if you have any questions about creating image collections, definitely pop them into the comments. You can do it straight away as we're going. I can see it on the side of my screen there, so I'll keep an eye on it. Richard's on the Amarone. Fair play, Richard. Fair play. Okay, we should stop talking about wine and start talking about photography. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share screen now. Actually, before I share screen, I'm just going to make a couple of points I wanted to make generally about image collections and that as a process. When I started out taking pictures, I was definitely completely focused on just going out, enjoying it, creating individual images, and I just enjoyed the process of going out and taking pictures, as I still do now. Getting up in the morning, being excited about what the light might bring, the type of conditions you're going to get, the photo that you've imagined in your brain that you really want to make. and that expectation, and just it was just a process of physically going out and making new photographs that was exciting and still is exciting. I guess over time I started to get the individual sort of going out and make pictures aspects of things didn't feel as strong to me, and I'd have to credit seeing lots of the things that Dara did, years ago when we first met in the craft fair, which was probably myself and Dara would have met 2007, 2008. Dara Muldowney I'm talking about now, and Dara was kind of putting more collections of images together at that point, and I could really see the value in that, not just in terms of something that you can sell at an art show, or which is important honestly in creating image collections. Like if you want to sell your work, it's much stronger being able to have a narrative and a concept that you can give out to people, but also just from a satisfaction point of view, there's something for me anyway a little bit more satisfying about kind of putting a whole concept together of continuously working on an idea. And I love doing the traveling, like I absolutely love doing the traveling. I've been in Namibia for the last 2 weeks and it has been absolutely incredible the experience, honestly, but I also like having these local projects that are at home. And one final thing I'll say kind of in the introduction, and it's great to see there's so many people here watching this evening, but a lot of you guys I'm sure have been in workshops and things like that with me, so I always like to have an individual project that's separate to my workshops, because I take so many pictures on the workshops. I really like to be able to go off and have something that's completely separate to that, that's just mine with my photography. So let's start looking at some pictures. Hopefully this works. Here we go. So I've just shared my screen there now, guys, so hopefully you should be able to see that. And I'm going to grab something from down here, and you can probably see in the very corner there of your screen now, I've got this Wild Garden book, and it's actually sold out, this book. I think I made 1,000 copies of it back in 2011, and it's totally sold out for years now. I just have old copies of it left still here in the house, and I shot that project totally on film. So it was done on transparency film, a mixture of a Pentax 6.7 6x7 centimeter film. So if you can picture that, normally it's 35 millimeters, so it's really such a significantly bigger piece of film that most of the work was shot on, and that gets you much better resolution, of course, for printing. And still it's probably not as good as the digital cameras are nowadays, but back then when I was shooting the Wild Garden project, it was between kind of about 2006 and 2011, maybe 2010, and the digital cameras that were out then were really crap. It was like a Nikon D200, which was a 6 megapixel camera or something like that. It was really low quality, so shooting the bigger format of film got you a much better quality for printing. And again, I don't want to go through this as a sort of an individual image by image point about the pictures that I made in that Wild Garden project, but what I more wanted to say was that the experience of trying to create an image collection through Wild Garden gave me experience that I brought forward onto the next project for sure. So I would say that when I did the Wild Garden project, stylistically, I created a whole range of different pictures. I was really all over the place with the style of the pictures. So if, for example, you see this picture here, which is an image from Loch Tay in County Wicklow. I should say, for people that are totally unfamiliar with this work, that Wild Garden was all based in County Wicklow, which is a county just to the south of Dublin. Now I'm just going to try and make this bar disappear here, guys. Sorry about that. No, I thought the dock would just slide down. I'm going to bring it over this side. There we go. That's better. So So stylistically, I made all different types of pictures. This is Loch Tay, as I said, in County Wicklow. And, you know, when I was going out, of course, I was just really learning at this point, trying to figure things out myself with my photography, not knowing exactly what I was doing. As I said, everything was on film, so you had to use like hard graduated filters, for example, to hold in a sky like this. And it was really difficult to get exposures like this in the bag. But if I look at this image and I compare it to something like this, you know, both taken in the same project, they're stylistically very different. They're also a different shape. So when I was initially doing this, even though I mentioned that the film had a 6x7 centimeter format, I didn't really pay much attention to the format of the film. I would just take pictures like this. This is around a 6x7 or something like this, and I would just crop it. You can see it's a much narrower dimension in this picture. Upright, that's a little bit narrower as well. It's not quite 6x7. I didn't pay any attention to how I would crop the pictures. And I think when I look back on that afterwards, and I'm going through the different pages in this book, you know, I can see that images fit on the pages in, like, you know, totally different ways, and you know, there's not much consistency to the presentation of the work. And it's not that I'm, you know, it was a learning curve. I'm not, you know, hard on myself about it. I took the pictures between 2006 and 2011, so, you know, I was in my late 20s, and as I said, it was a learning curve. But trying to put the image collection together in the first place really helped me, because the next project I did, for example, Dublin Salt, I made sure all the cropping was the exact same in the images. And then when I go to print stuff in an exhibition, it presents much better together, because you want the heights to be the same. It doesn't have to be, but it makes it lovely and consistent if all the heights are the same. So for example, for Dublin Salt, I made sure that everything was cropped 3x2. And it just really helped with the presentation in the book, the consistency in the presentation of the exhibition. Also, what I would say is, when I look back on the Wild Garden project, I think, you know, there's images that I still love from that particular series of pictures, but there's things I look back and go, Jesus, what was I thinking? But, you know, if that's not happening to us, then we're probably not evolving very much, if we still think what we took 10 years ago is absolutely brilliant, and we don't see some flaws in that, and we don't see the evolution of our work. And putting image collections like this together definitely helps the evolution of your work, in terms of the presentation, as I've mentioned, in terms of the consistency and style, and a whole range of different skills that you learn from really trying to put something together like this, you know. So here's a super snowy scene in County Wicklow, another snowy one that we've seen. I'm just going to go through a few of these from Wild Garden, and, you know, some pictures, as I said, I'm still happy. I still quite like this picture. This was a kind of a misty day up in Ballinasloe Woods, but I can see, actually, I remember I shot this with a Pentax 645 because my camera gear was robbed from my gaff about a couple of months before I finished this project, and my Pentax 6.7 was taken. So this is with a 645. So again, I didn't crop it consistently. It's slightly narrower. You can see this next image is much squarer. This is up in Wicklow Mountains again, over by Glen McNass, and I did try and photograph this scene for a number of years, and getting that perfect purples and getting the graduated filter to hold the sky in like that in a high dynamic range situation when your film already has very limited dynamic range was quite tough. But again, with the evolution of the style of things, I'm not sure if this is a picture that I would print anymore. You know, I still think it's a pretty picture, but I'm not sure if there's a huge amount of images from this that I would want to print. I guess what I also learned from it is that there is certain pictures that I look back and see something in that still resonates with me, you know. This would be one of them. It's more abstract sort of image, just appealed to me a little bit more. Something like this that's more clean and minimal. Again, more abstract details of the trees in Glendalough on a misty day. Less so this, even though that was the front cover of the book. And this is one that I still really love from that Wild Garden project. But that's just a really quick look at a few of the images there, and I don't know, what do you guys think? Have some of them stood the test of time? Have some of them not? Those pictures are, you know, some of them are, well, they're all more than 15 years old now, you know. Some of them are, some of them are nearly 20 years old. I don't know where the time has gone, honestly. It's mental. Yeah, so from that point of view, the learning experience for me of then going on and doing this Dublin Salt was the next local project that I personally shot. And I had this looking a lot more consistent. But something happened to me in the interim of doing all that, and I made the Wild Garden book, published it in 2011, October 2011. I had the exhibition in town, but actually the previous August I went to Burning Man, and I'd spent a bit of time out there photographing this temple. And I'm not going to explain the whole story of the Burning Man project again, because I've done that before, but you know, I think this period of shooting also reflected that kind of inconsistency in terms of the presentation. But I've ended up doing with the Burning Man work subsequently, because it's still some of my absolutely favourite work that I've ever done, is I've pulled out like a section of the work that I present online where I can kind of find that more consistency in the presentation. That just really became important to me personally after these two books. I think, you know, it can also be helpful when you're doing things like at the kind of licentiatships and associateships and all that sort of, those camera club qualifications can help you with this sort of presentation aspect of things, of trying to create something cohesive that works together. Burning Man, for me, while it still has, as I said, some of my absolute favourite images, what I ended up personally doing retrospectively was curating it down into a set of pictures that I presented online, that I managed to find a little bit more consistency in. I still had a couple of images that I hadn't cropped. Most of them have like a 3x2, but there was a few images that just weren't quite 3x2, and I couldn't retrospectively crop them the way I'd edited them and the way the material was and how I'd shot it and the whole thought process. So I didn't quite have that consistency with the presentation of the shape of the pictures. But I think when I look through them now, I've managed to find a little series like this, which you're kind of drawn into this, hopefully into like this sandscape where you see these little figures and individuals, and it builds as you go through the series of pictures until eventually the building is totally burnt. There's Rebecca, loves the Burning Man images. Thanks a million, Rebecca. Yeah, there's still some of my favourite pictures, you know, for sure, that I've ever taken, and I have one of them in my kitchen now in the in our new house that we moved into last year. So I still absolutely loved them, and the experience was just incredible, just being there shooting and being in these dust storms where the light was coming through the dust. It was so diffused, the light, you know, it was like mist, but it was sand. You know, I love photographing mist, the way the light gets so diffused and it gets so soft and it gets so even, you know, and that was an incredible thing about photographing there, you know. So hopefully you can see like a little bit of kind of that consistency in the presentation, at least, of trying to find this entry point into the set of pictures, you know. And I think when we present these things, wherever it is, on our Facebook or Instagram more so, I guess, but certainly on a website or in book or in print, that's where this sort of stuff is more important. I just have a message there from Ruth saying crashed out. Is everybody, I don't know, is that her internet? Are you able to still hear me, guys? Give me an excuse to have some wine anyway. Still working, lads? Still working. Tell me, please. Back on now. Still there? Okay, sorry, that sounds like it's back now, Mary, so maybe it crashed at my end. Sorry about that, guys. I'll keep going anyway. So, yeah, one of the great things about photographing here was not just the way the dust diffused the light, but also how when the light came through the dust and the backlighting and the shape it created. The same way that the mist, you know, when the light comes through the back of the mist and it really lightens things up, and what it does is it shows the structure of what you're photographing, like whether that could be a tree, you know, or something at the edge of a lake. Generally it's a tree, or a little island on the lake, and you can see it here in that building as well. The lighting was just incredible, and I was really trying when I was photographing this as well, because I was conscious that this project was about people. So I just love the two people on the right hand side looking on at this pretty amazing building. You can see the dust again and how all that light is coming through it, and the different people in the different points of the picture. This was the inside of the building of that temple that we just saw a moment ago, and everybody is kind of meditating and things like that in there. This is the picture that I mentioned earlier that's in my sitting room, or in my kitchen should I say, and still, I mean, it could be still my favorite picture I've ever taken. I hope it's not my favorite picture I ever take, because I mean, I'd be happy if this was the best picture that I ever took, but I took it like 13 years ago. I'm 43 this summer, so I took it when I was 30. So it'd be nice to, you know, to still have some time to make better pictures. But I do absolutely love this image, and you know, it's something, again, when I look back on and I critique the work and I think about the collection, and it bothers me a little bit the way some of the cropping is and some of the presentation is, but there is images from this particular series that I look back on and still absolutely love. Margaret's asking me, how did you get that dust out of your camera gear? You just need a nick on, Margaret, and it's fine. It's fine, you know, it doesn't get in. It's just so well sealed. I'm only joking. I had a thing called an Aquatech bag, and I had this bag around the camera, and it was a little bit awkward to use, and it just has like a kind of Velcro strap that tightened up around the front of the lens and kept most of the dust out, you know. But honestly, the weather sealing on most cameras is very good now. You don't want to be in a ridiculous storm, but you know, I was in Namibia last week and I was shooting and there was dust going around, and I just kind of got on with it. I didn't get too stressed about it. So Becky's asking, do you reprocess older pictures to try and improve them with the new version of Photoshop and Lightroom? No, not for me anyway. I mean, there is certainly evolution in how Lightroom and Photoshop work. There's absolutely no question about that. But, you know, luminosity masks have been around for 20 odd years. And you've been able to make complicated selections for a long time. What has happened with post-processing and the tools that are available, that it's made those complicated selections much more accessible to people, and there's absolutely no question about that. But I'm not saying I never reprocess pictures, because I look back and see things that I've done wrong in my processing all the time. You know, I think that happens to everybody. Not with every picture, but certainly that happens. I honestly don't look back even after whatever it is, 2011, so 13 years. I don't see anything particularly wrong with the processing in this picture. But I guess the point is, in a roundabout kind of way, is that the evolution of the software for me has just made things more accessible rather than revolutionize what I personally do with my pictures. We still want to select skies, direct contrast, drive the eye through the picture, but you know, that was being done by, you know, the great photographers like Ansel Adams. When you look at those pictures where he's dodging and burning and driving the eye through the picture, and that's the most important thing in post-processing, not the evolution of the tools. The tools are just about accessibility to complicated selections, essentially. Obviously, it can be different if you want to, you know, I don't know, add a moon into this picture or something like that doesn't exist. And yeah, the tools are quite different now, but that's not really my thing personally. I don't. I remove little things from the picture that bother me, distractions and things like that, but I don't add something that's substantively wasn't there to my pictures. It's just not my thing. I don't think there's anything especially wrong with doing that. I guess it's just about saying that's what you're doing. You know, that's kind of the important thing, I think. So at the end of this process of everybody meditating at this building at Burning Man, then of course they burn it, and that was a nice conclusion to the set of work, you know. So if I just come back to myself for a second, you can see I put the building on the front, and then I put it burning on the back in black. And the project was called Life and Death because it was about the idea that the building, basically the kind of fundamental aspects of how we all live our lives, were played out there, in the sense that people were getting married there and having, you know, various joyful ceremonies at this building at Burning Man. But they were also writing messages for people who died, and there was that kind of cathartic aspect of things. So there was that kind of fundamental aspects of life and death playing out there. So again, the presentation of these things, having white on the front and black on the back, was you know, an important consideration of it, and you know, the black finish of the book is actually just this black line here, and that's after the building kind of collapsed, and it was the final shot in the image, so, or the final shot in the series. So those sort of little aspects of, you know, again, presentation, little narrative based things, they help to tell the story of the collection of pictures that's more significant than just showing a single image, in my opinion anyway. So that was a little bit about Burning Man. Any questions or anything like that about that, guys? Feel free to throw any questions that you might have there in the comments. Oh, I have that final image. Sorry, I'll show it to you on this screen as well. Let me just share that quickly. There was that final image, so you can see a bit better. And it was quite extraordinary, honestly, when they burnt that building. They just stuffed it full of fuel, you know, and it went up, and I was on that kind of the inner circle of all these people were sitting around watching it, and like the heat was just so intense from the building. Like I thought it was going to melt, honestly. And the comment somebody made earlier about how'd you get the dust, and Margaret I think mentioned earlier, how'd you get all that dust out of the camera? Well, actually on that evening it was totally calm, and I took off the Aquatech bag, and I thought, right, I'm just going to enjoy this. Of course, all the dust kicked up, and my camera was completely, like, from jet black Nikon D3X to completely white, completely and utterly white with dust by the end of it. So there's Mario asking, is the book for sale? Mario, I'll bring one to you in Croatia when I see you, but it is you can find it online, but I will definitely bring you one, my friend. yeah, so that's a little bit about Burning Man. I'm going to take an opportunity to pour a little bit of wine for myself. What happened, I guess, for me in that kind of interim period, I don't know if you guys have ever struggled with this, but I struggled with it for quite a while with my photography. Is when I did the Wild Garden project, I was just learning about photography. I was just like rambling around the hills with my camera gear, loving life, kind of romantically thinking, oh, I'm just going to sell loads of prints of this and, have a nice easy life and all that. But I wasn't thinking, stylistically, and I wasn't critiquing my work too strongly in that way. I was just kind of focusing on this geographical area of Wicklow to take pictures. And then when the Burning Man thing came along, that was just a mate of mine said, "Here, do you want to come out and photograph this thing in the desert?" And there's a bit more of a backstory to that, but it fell into my lap. It really fell into my lap, and then I just realised this has come off. Sorry about that, guys. But the projects really fell into my lap, and when that sort of period ended for me in 2013, where I had done the Wild Garden and the Burning Man, I didn't really know what I wanted to do with the work. And I was doing all the workshops and I was seeing all these different styles of images coming through, and it took me a bit of a while to get my head back into what I wanted to do and to figure out a style and a look at the pictures and to take on board what had happened from the previous projects and hopefully bring it to something a little bit better with the new one. There's Noel asking me, living the dream, do you mean? What did I say, no? Have I had too much wine? Tell me what I said today. I didn't say living the dream, obviously. I wait for Noel to respond there. So this was the next collection of work that I produced, which was Dublin Salt, and I think I certainly found a more sort of artistic presentation of the work in this particular book, and I also found maybe a little bit more consistency at times with the imagery itself, but I still sort of felt when I look back at it, there was definitely conflicts in the sort of the range of work that I had and that I wanted to put into a book. And I have to say, one of the things that was incredibly helpful for me in that regard was to have this company I worked with called Read That Image, who were honestly brutal about what would go into the collection of work. So I think that's also something that's hopefully a decent bit of advice, is that if you're putting a book together or you're putting a collection of work together, we're so emotionally invested in the experience that we've had. So having someone around that is brutal and will, tell you that this doesn't work with this or this doesn't go with that, and we need more of the other, like just having somebody that's impartial, that has an opinion that you can trust, I think is really, really important. So for example, when let's look at these two pictures. These are two of my favorite pictures from that Dublin Salt collection that I did, and this is the one from the old Dunleary Baths, and this is the one from Sandymount, but they're extremely different. They really are extremely different. So trying to find again a way to present these in the same collection of work presented a few challenges. My screen is not sharing, thank you. Here we go. That should be working now. Sorry about that, guys. That was not a technology issue. That was just pure and simple operator error. So the two images that I was trying to show you that are quite different, but that I really like, is this picture here and this picture here. They're totally different tonally. They're totally different in terms of atmosphere. They're totally different in terms of color. So how do you kind of fit these things together? Well, for me in the presentation of the book, I can't take credit for that. But one of the things, again, I guess that I was attached to both images completely emotionally, and I didn't see for a second how there would be a conflict in presenting these things together. I was just creating this collection of work for Dublin that I really, really liked, and having these experiences in Dublin Bay, and then thought, well, that's it, just put them into the book. But what the guys kind of would be more considerate of, for example, is how they would move from, let's say, a picture like this, okay, which is very calming, and very simple and very warm, and move to another picture that it's not jarring to turn the page because they're both warm, even though this is much more grimy and much more kind of punchier, let's say, less sort of nature driven. But then to come to the next one, which is the picture that we're looking there. So that kind of evolution of that yellow, you see just a little bit of yellow being introduced and a lot of yellow being introduced, which allows you to move to something a little bit grimier because the way the yellow comes through, and then that allows me to move to the storm picture. So finding a connection in the images, even if they're stylistically very different, can help you to present images that are stylistically very different within one collection of work. You probably don't put them side by side. You definitely don't put them side by side. But there is elements like that, like I've just demonstrated, from having a very calming picture, and tonally allowed me to move through that set of pictures. And I shouldn't say it allowed me to, because this was down to the sequencing that the guys did at Read That Image, the designers did, Mary says, I love the Dublin one. Thanks, Mary. Appreciate it. Helen's saying, that's what I struggle with, getting completely different images to work together. Easier if tones are similar. It is easier if tones are similar. And then, you also have to ask yourself there, Helen, like, what's the purpose of what you're trying to do? Is it just that you want to go out and take pictures because you enjoy the experience of going out and taking pictures? And in doing that, it's going to result in a whole different range of images that stylistically don't necessarily fit together, and that's okay, because you're enjoying the experience. And I know you take great pictures, Helen, so that's not in doubt either. But let's say you want to present something, that's a little bit more significant of your work. And that could be a book that you want to do at Christmas, or it could be a calendar, or it could be a little exhibition or things like that. And in that case, you do have to think a little bit more critically and a little bit more constructively about the type of images that you're making. But I think if you look at that little sequencing there is ways to connect these things together. So, you've got very calming blue, and you move from calming blue into calming yellow, and then into aggressive yellow, and then down back into calming yellow and back into calming blue. So there is ways to bring these things together that are a little bit more diverse. But also what's crucially important is, what do you want to do with the pictures? Does it even matter? I found for me that it motivates me to get out and do stuff myself, to bring these collections of work together. And I feel that, it allows me to present my work in a stronger way, and it makes me more proud of my work when I'm able to do these sorts of things. And being brutally honest, from a business point of view, it also gives me stronger narratives and stories to tell, to help me get myself out there as a photographer, as an artist, as doing the workshops and in all that sort of stuff. So that's also it's also important to me. But I also think it does help you improve to focus on something, because, for example, this picture that's up on the screen, it's many years going down to to Sandymount and the Poolbeg to get these kind of incredible conditions to create something really different. So working on a sequence of pictures generally means that you go back to the same place numerous times, and that allows you to dig a little bit deeper into what you're actually doing. And I know that Helen, for example, that you do that in Dublin Bay, and I think that that's a good thing. And you know, as I said, I like both. I like the immediacy of going somewhere fresh and just getting great images, because the landscape is so inspiring, and you get that kind of like short burst, that rush of excitement, which is fantastic. But there's definitely a benefit in something of being a little bit slower, a little bit more paced, you know, return to the same places time and time again. Margaret's asking me, does the collection need to tell a story? I think that's a really good point to make, Margaret, and something that I did want to broach this evening when we were talking about collections of work, because I think if you look from a photographic perspective about what's supported within the arts community in Ireland, so let's say the Gallery of Photography or the Royal Hibernian Academy or even the Arts Council, even though I have been fortunate to get a few grants over the last couple of years from the Arts Council, but what I would say generally is that work that is text-based, more story-based, has a narrative that has a social commentary, let's say, is much more likely to be recognized as art, let's use that word. And the reason I mentioned those other institutions, because I think that recognition of the work as art also comes with support from those institutions. Whereas I think if you look at work like my own work, or you know, Dara's or Rohan's or something like that, the work is quite obviously aesthetic. You know, there is narratives and stories that come with the work. Like, you know, with Dublin Salt, for example, it was just all about my reconnection with that Dublin landscape of trying to find a style and trying to find a inspiration outside of the workshops, being honest with you. You know, Burning Man had a narrative in terms of the story of what was happening at that building, you know, and just, that was a document of an incredible event. Most recent project, In a Different Light, was just, again, a real search to reinvent the light in a place of being kind of desensitized almost to a landscape that I was totally familiar with. So there's motivation, there's a story in this work, and there is a narrative. But maybe it's not totally answering your question, but I think it's an important thing to discuss, because it was something I wanted to raise at the outset, was the idea of something having a story, a narrative, a geographical grounding, versus something that has a narrative that provides a social commentary. And my work does not provide a social commentary. I don't think that's not me. You know, I don't have something to say that provides that commentary in the work. And I don't know, does that mean that the work is not art? I mean, what do you guys think? Do you think the work has to provide a social message or say something about the world besides this is beautiful or this makes me feel this way? Does art have to say something deeper? Does it have to have a social commentary? I'll have a sip of wine. It's probably better to have a drink of wine when you're going to talk about social commentary in photography, particularly when you're unqualified to do so. I'd love to hear some comments about that, though, because there is quite a clear distinction in Ireland anyway in terms of work that's in a certain type of galleries that's not aesthetic. It's a collection of work, and it has a more text-based narrative. I feel like with that type of work, you almost have to read about it to understand it. Maybe that's just my limited intellect, but when I look at that type of work, I can't understand it unless I read the text. I'm a little bit confused, for example, with the Royal Hibernian Academy, with the RHA, and they have an open submission. And when you look at the work that's in their open call, it looks like that unaesthetic work, photography-wise, but presumably it's passing some kind of social commentary. Now, I can't get that without the text, and they don't have any text on submission, and they don't present any text in the exhibition itself. So I'm totally fucking confused by it, to be honest with you. But it's definitely a thing. It's definitely a thing. There's some comments coming in anyway. Everyone feels different based on their interpretations. Yeah, for sure. It only needs to give you happiness while viewing. That's interesting. So that's the kind of thing I'm kind of driving at, is that, yeah, what does it, with the image collection, it creates something that's a bit stronger. It has more visual impact. It maybe brings you more happiness to see a collection of work. As you mentioned, Kathy, does that make it art? Just that it provides happiness for viewing it, or does it need to say a little bit more? Helen mentioned Irish galleries, are only interested in that social commentary type of photography. I think that's very true. Rightly or wrongly. I guess I would feel that, from that point of view, that when something is meant to encapsulate photography, it should encapsulate a range of photography. I don't think that stuff that is honestly very generic and unoriginal should have support in the galleries. I think work needs to be original, and that's something that I'm always striving to with these image collections, is to present work that people haven't seen before. I see the same pictures rehashed time and time again on Facebook and on Instagram, and I see my pictures that I've taken, and then I saw some guy with pictures in Booterstown in like an outdoor photography magazine who's got on about Booterstown as a location, which nobody was really photographing until I took all those pictures in Dublin Salt. And so I do think that the collection needs to have some originality to it. A few more comments here. This is creating a bit of discussion, which is good. Ruth says that the work of all artists, etc., is fashionable at different times in history. That's a fair point. So, Ruth, are you saying I'm going to be famous when I die? That'd be good. I'd take it. So many people making social commentary. It's refreshing to get pure artistic works without thinking, what is the agenda here? Yeah, Malcolm, and that's the reality, I guess, with this type of landscape work as well, is that there isn't, because there isn't that commentary, that it is, it's you're able to hopefully just sit there and enjoy it for what it is, and I think when I'm out taking pictures anyway, and I'm presuming you guys feel the same, like you get lost in that moment of taking a picture, and you're just completely in that flow state of just enjoying the process of being there. And hopefully the work then brings people into that state, or shares a little bit of that energy that you felt when you were taking the picture. But there's no question that having a series of pictures like that form a wider exploration and narrative, that draws people in more. There's absolutely no question about that. Paul says he doesn't think social commentary is necessary to call something art. Social commentary probably makes something more marketable. Yeah, I mean, it's I'm not sure if that's totally it on one level, Paul, because the work is not aesthetic. So it's not, I don't think the work, like in those sort of places, is necessarily bought for people very often for their walls, because it's not aesthetic. But it does make it more marketable in terms of selling it as a show that's maybe a sort of a higher form of art, let's say. Let's call it that. I personally always felt that there wasn't support for people like myself, or the Dars, the Rowans, people like that within the landscape photography community, or people making aesthetic work. But it's an interesting conversation, and thanks for all the comments on that. So a couple of things I guess I just want to draw your attention to as we're kind of coming to the end of the talk, and I'm getting through the bottle of wine. So one of the things I guess that I have personally used over longer periods of time, or in the latter projects that I've done, is post-processing to create consistency in the presentation of the work. And really what that means for me is just my latest work, for example. And I'm going to remember to share the screen this time. My latest work, for example, in a different light. Hopefully if you see this work together here, you feel there's a consistency in the style of the work. You can see that, excuse me, all the images are cropped the same. I've toned all the pictures with this very blue light. I've shot them all at night. I've used this single light source, and I've done it all within a kilometer of each other. So I found all these different stylistic elements, they're technical choices to bring this look and this feel to this particular body of work. And the narrative for me, or the thing that drove me to make the collection, was again that search for originality in work, you know, for trying to find trying to feel inspiration myself in creating something that didn't necessarily always look the same, you know. And then I also just got into the vibe of being down there on my own at night. You know, initially when I went to take these pictures and I was off in Glendalough in the wee hours of the night, initially lots of really sound people came to help me to take these pictures and help me set up the light and do all that, but I just couldn't fully relax when I had other people there. I just felt you know, like other people had to be looked after. I couldn't go when I wanted because they'd kind of come to help me, and you kind of felt you had to give them a bit of inspiration or something. Or if I wanted to stay long, I was, you know, worried were they tired or cold or whatever. So setting up the light on your own was a bit of a pain in the arse, but ultimately I got into the flow of being there and enjoying the experience. The images, when you see the raw files, they're not as blue as this, you know, so that blue toning really came into things, and you can see they're all cropped absolutely consistently as we go through the series of pictures. A lot of them were blends to control that really wide dynamic range of, you know, having this single light, really bright light source, for example, behind a tree here, and just the dynamic range was difficult. And, you know, some of them are 12-15 minute exposures to be able to get that bright light at the top, but also have the detail in behind the tree. So again, if we're kind of talking about this, and one of the things that was mentioned earlier was, you know, have the tools changed, the processing. You know, for me, the most control is still with the manual hand blending with the masks, which has been around for a long time, you know. Again, that single light source, and I can't tell you how many times I had to go down here to get mist in the middle of the night, because the mist really builds, you know, just at dawn, and, you know, as the mist starts to build, it starts to get brighter. So it was hard to get mist and reflections and to get this really outworldly lighting that's in these pictures. So creating that image collection for me kept me motivated to keep going. It's like I want to create more of these, you know, even though it was frustrating and I wasn't getting what I wanted to create more of them. So that gave me more motivation and more satisfaction of putting the collection of work together. This one I had the light just shone across the lake behind the tree, and sometimes what I'd do is I would just shine the light across the lake, and then I would just walk around the lake. Sometimes I would have a specific vision of I want to go shine the light on that tree in the mist, and most of the time when I had a particular vision it didn't work out. I would get there and the conditions would be wrong, or it would look totally different to how I imagined it, but sometimes it did work out. But a lot of times I just went and shone the light and then walked around and see how the light was interacting with the landscape that I basically created myself. Very long exposure up the top of the miners' village, and just a tiny bit of light on the waterfall. This is the last image I took in the sequence. I quite like the long exposure with the stars. I know most of the time you see astrophotography people like the stars very sharp. For me, this makes it just a little bit more abstract, which personally I enjoyed. Again, simple things, just shine the light around and just suddenly seeing how the light interacted with the reeds. And I like the lines, and just got that, I think a 24 to 70 out, and maybe 70 to 200, and just picked out the detail. Again, just that single light source, the calmness, the little bit of mist, and that's back to the start. But this collection of work was created over about a 10-year period, and it kind of ebbed and flowed my motivation to go down there. The struggle with getting the images of, you'd go so many times and you just wouldn't get what you'd hoped for. So that can be demotivating, you know, there's absolutely no question about it. But hopefully you can see the evolution in work and creating collections from, you know, being down in Wicklow and photographing this tree on the edge of the lake with a Pentax 6.7, you know, and having different shapes, having different color tonings, having different styles within the pictures, to kind of evolving over time to creating this consistency. You can see it here again, hopefully in the sanctum work, that there's much more consistency. The presentation of the work really goes together a lot better. When we did the big day talk, and I was chatting with Paul Kenny, who did one of the talks, and he said, he really liked the in a different light work, which was lovely to hear that from him, because I absolutely love his work. And he said, yeah, you really just went there and played, you know. So creating the collection and creating that body of work that's more significant, it requires you to go somewhere and play. But I would say that it requires you to go there a lot more than once, and to keep at it, and to consider as you're going through something, you know, what's the purpose of what you're doing. If you're just going out to enjoy it, to enjoy your photography and to enjoy the process of being there and taking pictures that you look at, that you're proud of, that make you feel good, and you can share with people that you care about and all that, and share online and win camera club competitions or whatever it is, then, you know, that's totally cool too. But if you want to try and, I guess, take the next step with your work for people to recognize a little bit more what you're doing, I think you do need to try and pull these collections together and think consistency of presentation, think consistency of shape, think consistency of light, think about, you know, geographical areas that you can work in, stories that bind the images together, like Sanctum. This was my 5 kilometer limit during COVID, and I just went on my 5 kilometer limit and shot this pier for 3 months. So that gives me a little bit of a narrative and a story, and something which motivated me to keep going and help me dig a bit deeper into the creation of the picture, to play a little bit more with something that I might normally move on from and go, well, I've been there 5 times, and well, I'm actually going to go 100 times, you know, over the next 3 months. And that was satisfying for me anyway. So yeah, I think that about gets us to time for this evening's talk. I hope that was somewhat interesting, guys. If you have any comments or anything to say about that, any questions, please feel free to fire them in there. I'll have another sip of my wine while I just check if there's any questions to respond to. Thanks, Becky. Thanks, Ruth, for commenting. I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for being here. Thanks, Breda. Appreciate everybody stopping by to do it. We'll have, when do we have another one? Got a couple of other things coming up. I guess what I was trying to do with this last one was, I guess, delve a little bit more into things from the kind of that artistic, creative point of view, thinking more about collections and thinking more about significant bodies of work. And Dara did a presentation on that the last time as well. But I will have the next one coming up is on April 17th, where I will be talking about masking in Lightroom, which tends to be much more popular than talking about image collections. So make sure to stop by and jump in and come to that one as well if you're around. It'd be great to see everybody. Thanks for all the comments there, guys. Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Colette. Gisela saying thanks. Dominique, merci. Thanks so much, Rebecca. Lovely comments, guys. So really appreciate that. So I'll sign off now, and yeah, we will see you all again soon. Good night. Take it easy. Bye bye.